Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the main event.
Imagine you walk into a car dealership. You see the sticker price, you haggle a bit, you agree on a number, and you drive off. Standard capitalism, right? But now, imagine the government walks in, grabs the dealer by the collar, and says, "Show me exactly what you paid the factory for this car. And if your profit is more than 5%, we're going to have a serious problem."
That is a terrifying image for any salesperson, but that is exactly what is happening right now in the halls of the Pentagon. We are looking at a draft memo that has leaked, and let me tell you, it is causing an absolute meltdown in the federal contracting world.
I bet it is. We're talking about a potential fundamental shift in how the Department of Defense buys billions of dollars of IT equipment. It's a crackdown on resellers, and the weapon of choice is a strict price cap.
Exactly. And to understand the gravity of this, you have to look at the scale. In fiscal year 2024 alone, the DoD spent about $2 billion through the GSA schedule on these specific technology products. We aren't talking about pocket change. We are talking about a massive chunk of the defense industrial base. And the Pentagon is essentially saying, we think we're getting ripped off and we're putting a hard ceiling on your profits.
So let's break this down. What exactly is in this memo? Who is it targeting? Because reseller can mean a lot of things.
Right. So this draft memo comes from Michelle Duffy, the Undersecretary of Defense for Acquisition and Sustainment. It's targeting a specific slice of the market. IT products sold through the General Services Administration, or GSA, schedule. Specifically, special item number 33411.
33411. Sounds like a prison cell number. What does that cover?
It covers the hardware backbone of the military's office work. Desktops, laptops, servers, routers, switches, even things like two-way radios and audio-video equipment. If it's electronic and you buy it new, it's probably in there. The memo proposes that for these items, the government will no longer automatically assume the price is fair and reasonable.
Which is a huge departure, right? Usually, if it's on the GSA schedule, the assumption is the vetting has already been done. The price is the price.
Precisely. That's the whole point of the GSA schedule. It's supposed to be a pre-vetted catalog to speed things up, but Duffy is saying not anymore. The new rule would require vendors to disclose the original manufacturer's price, the OEM price, and then reveal their markup percentage. And here's the kicker. If that markup is over 5%, you have to provide a written justification describing the value you're adding, and it requires higher-level management attention.
5%. In the world of business, especially when you factor in overhead, paying your staff, insurance, and compliance, 5% gross margin is razor thin.
It is incredibly thin, and that's where the panic is coming from. You have to understand the government seems to view these resellers as ticket scalpers. Just buying a laptop from Dell and selling it to the Army for a premium without doing anything. The memo explicitly mentions avoiding excessive pass-through costs and low-value added price markups. They think they are cutting out the fat.
But the industry isn't seeing it as cutting fat. They see it as cutting an artery.
Oh, absolutely. The reaction has been explosive. Federal News Network spoke to several executives, anonymously, of course, because nobody wants to put their name on a quote criticizing a pre-decisional memo. And they are furious. And the irony they are pointing out is delicious.
What's the irony?
Well, think about the political climate. We have an incoming administration that talks a big game about deregulation, about unleashing business, about making government procurement faster and easier. And yet, this memo does the exact opposite. It takes a firm, fixed-price contract, which is the simplest, cleanest way to buy something, and effectively turns it into a cost-plus contract.
Cost-plus meaning, I have to show you my receipts, my accounting, and prove my costs before I get paid?
Yes, it adds layers of bureaucracy. One executive asked, "How is this simplifying acquisition?" You are asking for audits, narratives, justifications. You are taking a transaction that should take days and turning it into something that could take months. And they raised a slippery slope argument that I think is quite valid. They asked, well, where does it stop? Are you going to cap the profit on office furniture next? What about plumbing supplies? What about HVAC systems?
That's a fair point. If you start dictating profit margins on commercial items, you are fundamentally changing the relationship between the government and the private sector. It sounds almost anti-capitalist.
That is exactly the phrase one of the experts used. They said, applying caps on fees or profit goes against capitalism. And beyond the philosophy, there is a practical argument about value. The government seems to think a reseller just moves a box from point A to point B, but these value-added resellers, or VARs, argue they do much more.
Give me an example, because I think a lot of listeners might be on the Pentagon side here. Why should the taxpayer pay a 20% markup on a laptop they could buy at Best Buy?
Great question. So imagine the Army needs 5,000 laptops. But they don't just need the boxes, they need them imaged with specific security software, they need them asset tagged, they need them delivered to 50 different bases on a specific schedule, and they need a warranty service that guarantees a replacement within 24 hours if one breaks in the middle of a desert. Dell or HP might not want to deal with that logistical nightmare. They just want to make the computer. The reseller handles the mess. They provide the engineering, the logistics, the last mile service.
So the markup isn't just profit. It's the fee for the service of making the product actually usable for the government.
Exactly. And the fear is that if you cap the margin at 5%, you drive out the high-quality partners. You drive out the companies that have engineers and support staff because they can't afford to operate on but. Who is left? The box movers. The companies that truly do nothing but process the order. So you might save money on the unit price, but you lose the expertise. You lose the supplier diversity. You lose the people who can tell a contracting officer, hey, don't buy that server, it won't work with your current rack system.
That seems to be a recurring theme in government procurement, stepping over dollars to pick up dimes. But I want to pivot to something else you mentioned earlier, the legal aspect. Is this even legal? Can the DoD just decide to ignore the GSA's determination of fair pricing?
That is the million-dollar question, or perhaps the $2 billion question. Legal experts are flagging this as a potential violation of the FAR, the Federal Acquisition Regulation. Specifically, there is something called TINA,
Tina?
the Truth in Negotiations Act. Now, generally, TINA requires contractors to provide certified cost and pricing data. However, there is a massive exemption for commercial items. The logic is that if a product is sold in the commercial marketplace, like a laptop, the market forces of competition have already determined the fair price. You don't need to see the cost data because the market sets the price.
Right. If I buy a toaster, I don't ask Walmart what they paid the factory. I just compare it to Target's price.
Exactly. And the FAR Part 12 and Part 15 reinforce this. They essentially prohibit the government from asking for certified cost data for commercial items when there is adequate price competition. Cy Alba, a prominent procurement attorney, weighed in on this. He said if the government is buying a commercial item on a fixed price contract, asking for this cost breakdown is a no-go. He argues that if the government thinks the price is too high, they have a very simple solution. Don't buy it.
Or find another seller.
Right. That's the competition argument. The critics are saying, if you want lower prices, don't regulate the profit margin. Train your contracting officers to negotiate better. If you get 3 quotes and they are all high, negotiate, or find a 4th quote. But don't try to rewrite the laws of economics by creating an artificial ceiling.
It does seem like a band-aid solution to a training problem. If contracting officers don't know what a laptop should cost, that's a skill gap, not a market failure.
And that's the real danger here. One executive pointed out that determining what is an excessive markup is entirely subjective. You are giving contracting officers, who might be overworked, undertrained, or risk-averse, the power to arbitrarily decide if a company's profit is fair. That leads to confusion, it leads to delays, and ultimately, it leads to companies saying, it is not worth doing business with the Department of Defense.
And we are already seeing a shrinking industrial base, right? We are constantly hearing about how hard it is to get innovative tech companies to work with the government.
Yes, and imagine telling a Silicon Valley startup, hey, come work with us, but you have to open your books, and we are capping your gross margin at 5%. They would laugh you out of the room. They have investors expecting 40, 50, 60% margins on software and tech. This mindset harkens back to the Cold War era of buying aircraft carriers, not the modern era of buying IT.
It feels like a clash of cultures. The Pentagon wants the control of a military operation applied to the fluidity of the commercial tech market.
It is a control mechanism. And remember, this is still a draft memo. It hasn't been signed. But the fact that it exists and that it references a GSA review that started back in June shows there is real momentum behind this. The GSA has been collecting data from resellers to understand the market, and now DoD is ready to drop the hammer.
So what happens next? If this goes through, does the price of laptops drop, or does the system grind to a halt?
Short term, Maybe some prices drop on paper. Long term, I think you see a massive exodus of value-added resellers. You see the gray market expand, and you see contracting officers buried under a mountain of paperwork trying to adjudicate whether a 6% markup is justified because a vendor offered 24/7 support. It creates friction, and friction in the supply chain is the last thing the military needs right now.
It's fascinating. We often think of defense spending as missiles and jets, but this battle is being fought over spreadsheets and server racks.
And it's a battle over the soul of procurement. Do we trust the market and competition, or do we trust regulation and audits? The Pentagon seems to be swinging toward regulation, just as the rest of the political world is screaming for the market.
It's a paradox, and one we'll have to watch closely. If this memo gets signed, December is going to be a very cold month for federal resellers.
Absolutely. And I'd advise every reseller listening to double-check their legal counsel and maybe start preparing those value justification narratives now. You might need them sooner than you think.
A sobering thought to end on. We've been talking about the Defense Department's proposed 5% cap on reseller fees, a policy that sounds simple on the surface but digs up deep questions about capitalism, bureaucracy, and the true cost of doing business with Uncle Sam.
It really does. It challenges the definition of fair. Is fair price dictated by the market or by a government official's calculator?
We'll leave that for our listeners to decide. Thanks for tuning in to this deep dive. We'll keep tracking this memo, and if it becomes official policy, you'll hear it here first.
Until next time.
Take care, everyone.
A special thank you to MarketUS.com for furnishing us this information. You can reach them at MarketUS.com or call them at 954-636-3232. Before we go, this deep dive was created by the MarketUS.com team. Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. It's right below the subscribe link.